The Trumpet Daily is presented by Stephen Flurry. The program analyzes world news and history from a distinct perspective and compares current events to prophecies found in the Bible. The program also offers free educational publications, including the Trumpet News Magazine and books and booklets. The Trumpet Daily is produced at the Philadelphia Church of God's home campus in Edmond, Oklahoma, and its sister campus in Edstone, England. More information is available at thetrumpet.com.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Tonight, amid the president's growing clash with Europe over the war with Iran, the Pentagon set to pull thousands of U.S. troops out of Germany.
We're going to cut way down, and we're cutting a lot further than 5,000. Thank you very much.
European leaders reacted that here in Yerevan, Armenia, at a European Political Community Summit with calm and without shock.
I don't see those figures as dramatic, but I think they should be handled in a harmonious way inside the framework of NATO. And if we do it that way, I think, it will highlight that Europe is taking more charge of this security, still working closely with the US.
And it's an important time in the world that like-minded countries come together with a positive attitude, look to solve some of the many challenges our citizens are facing.
The timing of this announcement comes as a surprise. I think it shows that we have to really strengthen the European pillar in NATO, and we have to really do more.
I believe we must strengthen our security and, let's say, develop our capacity to respond in this regard.
European leaders are also well aware that they don't possess the nuclear arsenal that the U.S. does.
How much longer can this continue without the whole thing just basically blowing up?
It would be rather foolish for him and limit him strategically, certainly in terms of options that he might have for conducting certain operations in withdrawing from Germany.
Since the Second World War, there's been this great idea of one band of brothers. I'm sure Trump would like to continue to do that. But of course, one could imagine that if things go on as they are, Europe is going to really continue to invest in its defense industries and try to change that equation.
Okay, so I'm getting the feeling that you don't want to talk about the US as an unreliable partner?
No, not at all, because we are working very close together until today, and we are. They told us what are their expectations and what are their plans, and so this is not a surprise at all for us. Our main effort during the last months was to synchronize things and to make clear what capability development means from the European perspective. And to be honest, this is nothing to talk about in the public with details.
Now, the US have about 36,000 soldiers here in Germany at the moment. 5,000 of those are going to go. And also crucially, Donald Trump has said that he's probably not going to station those long-range missiles, the Tomahawks, in Germany. How do you treat that? As mere political irritation, or is that strategic rupture between two important allies?
To be honest, we are discussing that with our partners and, of course, with the American representatives on all levels for a longer time, several months to be clear. So it is not a surprise at all. We are we are knowing that Europe has to step in, to lean forward and to bring more capabilities. Not that surprised like it might be for the public that this decision was made. And so we are working on the details now. And but it fits in our concept of capability development. And we as the German MOD, we are dealing with that. Yes, like we were prepared for.
Like we were prepared for. She said that several times in that interview. That's the Vice Chief of Defense in Germany, Nicole Schilling. And she said it several times. This is like we were prepared for. And I would think Germany, at least when it came to President Trump, egging on NATO members to spend more, probably were putting these plans in the works. But like Mr. Armstrong said, Americans don't understand German thoroughness. They have been planning for this next stage. I wanted to echo what Mr. Stephen Fleury said on the show yesterday about how thankful we need to be for the trumpet, for Mr. Armstrong, for Mr. Fleury, to understand, to be able to understand these events happening in the world. Winston Churchill warned about Germany rearming, and at that time, in the 1930s, Germany was trying to be covert about it. Everybody blamed Churchill for being an alarmist, and here Germany is doing it out in the open, the United States encouraging them to do it, and only Mr. Gerald Fleury will tell you what that means, why that's important. We'll talk about just the duplicity on the side of the United States, where on one hand, we're upset at the Europeans because, well, they won't help with the war in Iran. We're upset with them because of their socialist policies and their censorship, and in many ways view them as an enemy, while at the same time saying, take care of yourselves, rearm, build up a superpower to handle your own problems. You know, on one hand, we're fighting this war to defeat Iran, to keep them from getting stronger because they challenge our interests. And here you could say, well, on one hand, Europe is at odds with the United States, but we're fine with them arming. We're fine with them building up and becoming a superpower. Not a surprise. We planned for this. Well, it's not a surprise if you are a student of Bible prophecy. Welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. I'm Sam Livingston, your guest host for today's show. If you have comments, send them to td@thetrumpet.com. Subscribe to our Rumble or YouTube channel. And of course, every piece of literature that we mention on this program is free, and you can access it immediately at thetrumpet.com as well. Well, like I mentioned, Germany is finally getting its wish. America is leaving. Germany can rearm. And of course, it needs to do a lot of rearming. And as we'll go through these clips today, basically its approach is saying, well, we've got all of Europe that can help out together. Basically laying out the structure of the Holy Roman Empire. I wanted to read a few quotes from Mr. Gerald Fleury before we get to all of these clips. We've read these before, but you need to understand that German approach. I mean, they can talk and act as though, well, this is just, well, we're just kind of fumbling into this. We don't know what we're doing. We're just responding to the pressure that's being exerted by Donald Trump, and that is there. They've got a lot of excuses, a lot of things that make this look innocuous or innocent. Mr. Fleury, September 2018, Trumpet Magazine, Germany and Russia's secret war against America. What is not as obvious is the fact that Germany also wants to eliminate NATO. Many elite Germans feel their nation has now gotten all it can from the U.S., and they are ready to move on. Some powerful Germans today are thinking more and more about the Holy Roman Empire, and they want modern Germany to assume more power of its own in the spirit of that empire. They want to establish Europe as a mighty German-led superpower. These Germans know that NATO is an obstacle to their goal. You could say the United States. You could say the United States' presence in Europe is an obstacle to their goal. Mr. Fleury goes on, but Bible prophecies about the next resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire show that Germany will soon be spending substantially more on its military, and not within any kind of U.S.-led framework. We've been saying that for decades. Mr. Armstrong was saying it. Mr. Fleury was saying it in the 90s. This article is in 2018, before Germany made all of its big announcements about defense spending, substantially more on its military and not within any kind of U.S.-led framework. This, like Mr. Stephen Fleury said yesterday on the show, this should be the #1 story in the United States. This should be what everybody's talking about. And as we'll go through here, when you see Germany rising, it means America's doing something wrong. For all the talk about the religious resurgence, for all the talk about how righteous America is, if Germany's rising, there's a problem. Mr. Fleury, this is from an article back in May 2005. It's titled German Election Crisis and a New Charlemagne. He says, Herbert W. Armstrong prophesied of Germany's rise to frightening power again, even when it was beaten into rubble at the end of World War II. This time it will be far more powerful than it was in the Second World War. Since Mr. Armstrong's death, the PCG has continued to prophesy of Germany's rise to unprecedented power. But we need to understand why Germany and Europe are rising in power. God is going to use them to punish the very sinful nations of America, Britain, and Israel, unless we repent of our sins. Isaiah 10 verses 5 through 6. It's a hypocritical nation that Assyria is sent against. Mr. Fleury says, we are facing the most terrifying times ever on earth. Our #1 question is that of human survival. We must wake up and beseech our loving God for help. There is no other hope. He says, Germany is the #1 political power we need to watch. And it reflects so much about the state of the United States. If they're rising, it means America is about to be punished. The hypocritical nation is about to be punished. It's kind of like this meter that you can gauge, well, are we going in the right direction or not? And you see how powerful and how much stronger they're getting. That's not a good sign for the United States. It should be the #1 story. But you won't see that anywhere. Mr. Armstrong said it. Mr. Gerald Fleury is saying it. The trumpet, again, trumpets that message. Mr. Fleury mentioned the article yesterday at The Guardian. Germany's military power is on the rise. This time it must be firmly embedded in Europe. I mean, they're talking about this. It's like it's going to be the millennial reign that Hitler always wanted. The 1,000-year reign, the Reich. This has to be the way it is. It's an empire. Later in the program, we'll tie some of these events into the war in Iran as well. But one of the bigger issues, again, with just the 5,000 troops that the United States has taken out of Germany, I think there's about 36,000 there just in Germany, 100,000 throughout Europe. There's the strategic advantage that the United States needs to have in being over there. But then one of the other announcements that was made along with the reduction or the withdrawal of these 5,000 troops was that the United States isn't going to put in these missile defense systems that the Europeans were hoping for. Politico says Berlin faces missile gap after Trump's troop cuts. Germany thought the United States would soon deploy long-range missiles on its soil that could strike deep into Russia and help deter an attack. That plan is now effectively dead. After Donald Trump's move to cut thousands of U.S. troops from Germany, one of the units likely to go is a specialized force that was supposed to bring Tomahawk cruise missiles to Europe. Without it, Berlin and its allies are left with a gap in their defenses and no quick way to fill it. So they're going on talking about how they're frantically trying to find a way to basically replace the United States. And they said, well, if it's not under the NATO framework, well, at least these nations could just buy these things from the United States. And I'll get to this in a few minutes, but America is basically saying that we're out of them. We've got to dedicate them to our war in Iran. We can't even sell them to you. So now the Europeans are saying, well, really our option here is we just have to make our own. And there's Americans saying the same thing. Yeah, build your own equipment. We've talked about the German defense industry and how they're I think the third or fourth largest arms exporter in the world. It's not going to take till 2039 for them to become an empire. They could do this overnight. As I see it, back to this Politico article, as I see it at the moment, there is objectively hardly any possibility from the U.S. side to provide such weapons systems, Mertz said over the weekend. If the U.S. isn't willing to send its own systems to Germany, Berlin could try to buy them for itself. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius formally asked his U.S. counterpart, Pete Hegseth, last summer about acquiring long-range missile systems. Pointing to strain on the U.S. stockpiles thanks to the war against Iran, he added, after so many systems have been used up, I would immediately advise against it. Politico says, a longer-term option is the European long-range strike approach, a pan-European effort to develop a missile with a range of over 2,000 kilometers intended to provide a conventional deterrent independent of the United States. Think back to that quote from Mr. Fleury in 2018. They're going to develop a system independent of the United States. Where is that quote here? But Bible prophecies about the next resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire show that Germany will soon be spending substantially more on its military and not within any kind of U.S.-led framework. All of that based on Bible prophecy. And here it is in these secular sources reporting on the news that Europe is going to unite together to build a defense system. And of course, Russia is always the excuse that they use to do this. A conventional deterrent independent of the United States. Here's a montage just covering some of the angles and quotes about this story. This is clip 21.
Especially those Tomahawks, they were supposed to fill a gap, right? The Europeans, you've just said it, they are working on developing those deep precision strike capabilities. But these systems, the ELSA mechanism, that is not going to be available before the middle of the next decade.
But now the Trump administration is fast-tracking billions of dollars in emergency weapons sales to allies in the Middle East, while European partners have to wait. Security services across Europe warn Russia is rebuilding its military and could be ready for conflict with Europe by 2029. Some experts believe China could have a world-class force by next year. The Financial Times published the story this weekend with the headline, US warns Europe of delays to arms shipments as Iran war drains stockpiles. It says Washington has warned European allies, including the UK, Poland, Lithuania and Estonia, to expect long delivery delays for US weapons.
Because of the global situation, in other words, the war in Iran, it is a public secret that some of the stocks and delivery systems in the US are either going elsewhere or being delayed, but I don't see any need for alarm.
I know that there is a delay. It's probably a question to our Minister of Defense, what kind of missiles or ammunition we are missing, but it gives a signal that in Estonia and in Europe in general, we should much faster develop our defense industry, not relying on different countries in the world.
It is official by now. American footprint in Europe is diminishing, and questions loom what it means for the defense of the eastern flank of NATO.
The other decision Trump made was to revoke an agreement from his predecessor, namely to deploy mid-range missiles to Germany as a counterbalance to the Iskander in Kaliningrad. So that is in many ways opening the bigger deterrence gap, because as Europeans we don't have anything comparable right now.
We are experiencing the cost of our over-dependencies when we speak about the American umbrella in terms of defense and security. Let's be honest, this is the elephant in the room. And because we are all together and we consider we have to be more united, because there is a sort of a doubt or a question mark when we speak about the fact that no doubt about the American solidarity on all these fields. So the big issue we have is that we have a lot of, beyond the wars and beyond the crisis, we have a big de-risking strategy to deliver, which will request much more investment and coordination amongst the Europeans. And let's be clear, it needs more solidarity, more investment, better organization.
Minister of Estonia, they're saying we need to develop our own weapons systems. We need to do this ourselves. I should have had subtitles there for Macron or translation. He said, we are experiencing the cost of our dependencies when we speak about the American umbrella in terms of defense and security. Let's be honest, this is the elephant in the room. And we consider we have to be more united because there is a sort of doubt or question mark when we speak about the fact that no doubt about the American solidarity on all these fields. So Europe has to be more united. The big issue we have is that we have a lot of, beyond the wars and beyond the crises, we have a big de-risking strategy to deliver, which we request much more investment and coordination amongst the Europeans. And let's be clear, it needs more solidarity, more investment, better organization. The Holy Roman Empire, it's taking shape. The plans have been there, and Trump and Russia give them a perfect excuse to go ahead and do it. In fact, Trump is encouraging them to do it. Associated Press, what to know about the U.S. military presence in Europe as Trump seeks drawdown of thousands of troops. As part of its national defense strategy announced in January, a sweeping document laying out a vision on everything from deterring China to defending against cyber attacks to disrupting Iran's nuclear ambitions, the administration said Europe must do more for its own defense. So basically, the United States doesn't want to be bothered with Europe. The focus is on China. And there's a lot of people that say all of the strategy with Venezuela and Iran is meant to basically be an attack on China, to undermine China. And again, China is an enemy of the United States. But you look at the Ezekiel 23 and that prophecy about the lovers betraying or turning on the United States. Like Mr. Fleury said, the nation we have to watch is Germany. This article says, while we are and will remain engaged in Europe, we must and will prioritize defending the U.S. homeland and deterring China, it said. This is this document. Among other things, the document noted that Europe's economic power, while shrinking in relative terms globally, remains significant, and said that Germany's economy alone dwarfs that of Russia. And it's true. Germany is a lot more powerful. Europe together is a lot more powerful than Russia. But look at this counterweight that is rising up against the United States. And think about all of the Bible prophecies that we've gone through on this show for nearly a century, dating back to Mr. Armstrong, about Germany rising again. And now you see this war spirit in Germany. PBS did a pretty lengthy report that you can watch in its entirety for yourself, but we'll play some clips for you here. But this just talks about, I think they're interviewing some soldiers or maybe just as men on the street in Germany, but about what do you think of a German military? This is clip 6.
Of course, I think I'm a little bit concerned, but I'm not really afraid that Russia will attack us or a war will break out, because I think it's more like a warning or a wake-up call for us.
If the German government gets its way, passing out parades is going to be a far more frequent occurrence. The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has said he'll do whatever it takes to make sure that Germany is war-ready by 2029. He's boosted defense spending to make sure that by the end of the decade, Germany will have the strongest military force in Europe.
War ready by 2029. It's not far off. Even that one, I think that was a soldier, but they walk around. There's parades in the streets. They want this known. They want the German public aware of what's going on. I'm not really afraid that Russia will attack us. It's a wake-up call, and that's what the Germans are saying. But we know how God uses this instrument. Defense News, this was from a couple weeks ago. Germany unveils strategy for becoming Europe's strongest military by 2039. The personnel growth plan foresees expanding from 185,000 active duty soldiers today to 260,000 by the mid-1930s. Just talks about how they need to build up their reserves a lot more. It says a rapid buildup through 2029, a capability-focused expansion through 2035, and a longer-term technology-driven phase through 2039 and beyond. Anyway, they're preparing to be the military superpower of Europe. And it can happen, it will happen a lot sooner than 2039. When you read between the lines of even the cold open that we played and the way that they're talking, we've been prepared for this. Now, it does take a crisis to trigger a lot of this, and they've had many crises. Mr. Armstrong talked about the economic crisis that will bring the Holy Roman Empire together. But you look at how quickly all of these things can happen. This is from that Defense News article. It says, the scramble to figure out how to respond to Trump is a sign of Europe's lack of preparedness. They're quoting an analyst who also, he says, the real threat to European security is not a hostile America, it is Europe's own obliviousness and incompetence. So they're going at each other, the United States and Europe, not allies. Here's another clip from that PBS report, clip 8.
This footage from the Bundeswehr, or Federal Armed Forces, shows mechanized infantry training to defend the West against Russian aggression. How dangerous would you say this particular period is?
I'm now in the military since 42 years, and I must say I've never experienced such a dangerous situation like we are having it at the moment. The clock is ticking.
Increasing the pace of Germany's rearmament has become more urgent after President Trump reiterated his dismay over America's NATO allies' refusal to join the war against Iran.
We spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on NATO, hundreds of protecting them. And we would have always been there for them. But now, based on their actions, I guess we don't have to be, do we?
There's a split. There's President Trump talking about NATO. That German general saying, I've never experienced such a dangerous situation like we are having at the moment. Mr. Fleury again. But Bible prophecies about the next resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire show that Germany will soon be spending substantially more on its military and not within any kind of U.S.-led framework. Where else are you hearing that? Where else do you see this Trumpet magazine cover? The world is uniting against America. And then the issue just before that, decades of warnings about Germany. Should make you grateful for Bible prophecy. And you see it happening, but what's your response? How do you react? Another clip from that PBS documentary, clip 11.
So ammunition is one of our biggest challenges, so we need much more. Our industry builds up capacities currently, so they will produce a lot more, but we are only able, I guess, to defend Europe with our partners. So only munitions of Germany will not be enough to really defend us.
They need to be the Roman Empire. They need to be united. Something has to unite them. A crisis has to occur, and there are many, like I've said, that are forcing or allowing them to form this empire. Mr. Armstrong says to watch for the economic crisis. You've got the Holy Roman Empire, or the quote-unquote Holy and Holy Roman Empire, the Vatican, the Catholic Church, that will help unite them. But they need their partners. They need to get Europe together to do this. And Germany will be leading it. They need an empire. They want access to their own weapons. They don't want to be reliant on the United States. So they're building their own. This is a bit more detail about just how they're having to make these backup plans because, well, they were obviously just under the NATO umbrella, the United States using its own weapons over there. But even if you're out of that NATO umbrella, well, you could at least say, well, we'll use our own money to buy American weapons and have our own defense systems. Now they're saying, NATO, you can't rely on NATO anymore, and we can't rely on being able to buy American weapons. This is a clip from Deutsche Welle talking about how even the Iran war is causing this shortage, or making them all reevaluate, well, where do we get our weapons from? Clip 15.
But now the Trump administration is fast-tracking billions of dollars in emergency weapons sales to allies in the Middle East, while European partners have to wait. Security services across Europe warn Russia is rebuilding its military and could be ready for conflict with Europe by 2029. Some experts believe China could have a world-class force by next year. The Financial Times published the story this weekend with the headline, US warns Europe of delays to arms shipments as Iran war drains stockpiles. It says Washington has warned European allies, including the UK, Poland, Lithuania and Estonia, to expect long delivery delays for US weapons.
Tension building up there as well. President Trump is already upset at Europe. Europe is upset with President Trump, and now it's basically, well, we're trying to fight this war on your behalf, and we don't have weapons to give to you. Another one from that same report, clip 16.
Because of the global situation, in other words, the war in Iran, it is a public secret that some of the stocks and delivery systems in the US are either going elsewhere or being delayed, but I don't see any need for alarm.
I know that there is a delay. It's probably a question to our Minister of Defense, what kind of missiles or ammunition we are missing. That gives a signal that in Estonia and in Europe in general, we should much faster develop our defense industry, not relying on different countries in the world.
I think that was in the montage earlier. We should much faster develop our defense industry, not relying on different countries in the world. That's Estonia saying that. What are they going to do? Well, they need to be part of an empire. They need to be part of this union. There are so many knock-on effects as well from the Iran war. You see the world realigning. This was one that came up in the news feed this morning from Market Watch. The food inflation crisis will soon be all investors are talking about. And this it's something where, you know, President Trump said, well, we have no interest in the Strait of Hormuz. We don't get our oil from there. But then when it causes a problem for Europe, and Europe gets things from the United States, or it causes a problem for China, and the United States is reliant on China for certain things, well, it has all of these knock-on effects that, again, like we'll cover, are causing the world to realign. Market Watch says America is not starving. There's plenty of beef, wheat, and eggs. At the moment, food inflation is lower than core inflation, but Americans are still living with higher prices, up around 20% since 2022. President Trump is right when he says the U.S. doesn't rely on the Strait of Hormuz for its agriculture needs, but Europe and Asia do. And so they will outbid American farmers for fuel and fertilizer, forcing food prices higher for everyone, including Americans. So fuel, fertilizer comes through there, goes to Europe. Well, Europe can't have access to that, so now they have to battle or get in a bidding war with the United States, so the price is driven up. Market Watch says anyone who knows a farmer has heard stories of the worst year ever, but now American farmers are facing their most serious crisis since the 1980s. A newly released Farm Bureau survey of 5,700 U.S. farmers said 70% of farmers won't be able to afford all the fertilizer they need this year. Many are reducing planted acres. This potentially means less food moving through the supply chain and higher prices for what does make it to the market. And this is already impacted by the war in Ukraine, which supplies so much of the world's wheat. For now, U.S. agriculture is stable. Americans are not going to starve because of Hormuz. Yet risks remain. Fertilizer prices are much higher, and global buyers are competing for the same goods. If that competition intensifies, American farmers won't be insulated, and neither will consumers. You see, all of these regions, they're taking note of, well, if America does this, it impacts us here. And it's all leading to a siege. It's leading to this mart of nations where They work together against the United States. You see why Europe is so interested in South America and the Mercosur deal. They need a place where they can safely get their resources, their minerals from. And here, the United States, all of this is going on, and the United States is just, it's like, well, it's the 250th birthday. We're on the course to be better than ever before. And there are some good things. Going to war with Iran is a good thing. Using your power to take out those evil dictators is right. And there are some other things that President Trump, as we've noted on this show, is doing that's right. There's a lot that's wrong. But you look at all of those good stories, underneath all of it, you can never get away from the fact that that debt clock just keeps ticking up. This is a clip from a show on CBN just talking about how much money the United States owes. And Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Fleury have talked about it. The United States debt is a security threat. It's like our biggest vulnerability is that these other countries have so much leverage over us. And again, they're all so intertwined. If they're going to use that leverage, they're going to hurt themselves as well. But for, as we'll cover about Germany, you know, how much longer are they going to care about that? This is, you can play these clips together. You can play clip 1, 2, and 3.
I've been warning about this for 2 decades. America's national debt now exceeds the total annual output of our economy. Every hour, the debt grows by $180 million. That's $5 billion a day, and it's approaching $40 trillion.
Well, the United States government seems caught in what some are calling a debt-driven doom loop, and experts warn the situation could turn very bad very quickly.
30 NFL stadiums filled to the top with stacks of $100 bills. That still wouldn't be enough to hold the $39 trillion national debt. For that, you would need 7 more stadiums full of $100 bills. To make matters worse, the Penn Wharton budget model warns the national debt is actually closer to $100 trillion. Meanwhile, the Congressional Budget Office warns the federal debt is on track to hit $150 trillion within 30 years, equivalent to more than $1 million per household.
What would happen to the world order if the United States went bankrupt? These are really tough questions, and they're tough questions that you and I are going to have to deal with. This isn't something where we can kick the can down the road anymore, but it's an open question for all of us who are citizens of this great nation. In our 250th anniversary, are we looking at, are we not even going to be able to pay our bills?
It's a tough question. What would happen to the world order? And we're getting a look at it, but Bible prophecy said what would happen. And meanwhile, you've got President Trump, all they can talk about is the stock market. It was the same during the Biden years. Here's President Trump just gloating again about how great the stock market is. Clip 4.
Our country is hot. We're doing a good job. We're doing a good job. Stock market just at another high for the 59th time in 1 year. And it's been really great.
He's bragged about being the king of debt, knowing how to use debt to stimulate the economy, just like Barack Obama would do. And what happens? What happens when there's a collapse? You couldn't run a household like this. Here's another clip just talking about how the United States debt now outpaces the gross domestic product. This is clip 5.
For the first time since World War II, the national debt is bigger than the size of the economy. New data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis shows the debt reaching $31.27 trillion at the end of March. That's the debt of about $114,000 per American. At the same time, gross domestic product was estimated to be $31.22 trillion year over year.
There's no question that no country has ever remained a superpower when its debt got too large.
The Congressional Budget Office says increased spending on programs such as Social Security and Medicare, as well as interest payments, are driving the changes. It estimates by 2030, the U.S. could break the all-time record of a 106% debt-to-GDP ratio set in 1946.
We have the very dangerous situation where we spend more on interest payments on the national debt than we do on national defense.
It's interesting. It's terrifying. Mr. Fleury talked about all of these earth-shaking events that have happened since the last hour on May 5th, 2001, the last 25 years. And he said, well, there's all these, it keeps happening where you get these events where it's the worst since World War II. It's the worst in the last century, the worst in the last 80 years. They put that number up on the board, that the last time that it was encroaching on this number, this debt to GDP ratio, was 1946. We have a very dangerous situation, she said there, and nobody is working to get out of it. There's all the political disputes about Republicans winning these elections and the rhinos getting kicked out, and well, it's great, you redrawing the congressional map, but nobody talks about actually trying to solve this problem. President Trump doesn't bother with it. Germany as well. You see these nations are struggling. The United States, we have such a massive welfare state. And as I'll cover here in just a minute, applies to the whole Western world, is there's this massive struggle because, well, we're just not, our families aren't big enough. We don't have enough children to pay for the welfare costs that the retiring generations need covered, because there are so many more of them. And then as cost of living rises, housing becomes more expensive, much more of the paycheck goes to paying for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of these things where the older generations need support. Well, that deters the younger generations from having more kids. So then there's fewer workers. So they're talking about, and China and Japan are struggling with this as well. The United States is going to face it. And a lot of people say, well, the solution is immigration, which doesn't come close to fixing it, actually causes even more problems. Germany is at a similar point as well with their growth rate. There's this video, I won't play clips from it because it's like a cartoon animation, but there's interesting stats and news in it that would be good to understand. The video is titled "Germany is Over." It's by this German YouTube channel, but it's like an animated thing. But they were talking about how, well, there's the boomer generation that's so big and large, but then as things got more difficult down the line, the younger generations weren't having bigger families. They don't have as many workers to support the older generations. That first generation following the boomers, there were 5 workers per retiree, and now they're on pace to have just 2 per retiree. And this is basically the point was the young people in Germany are getting desperate and angry, was the point, because they don't have money to afford what their parents and grandparents had. They don't have money to pay rent. Larger chunks of their paychecks are going to the welfare programs that take care of the larger population of older Germans. They're talking about how much debt Germany has to take on to subsidize those welfare programs. And then that causes prices to rise as well. And then the solution for a little while was, well, let's just have immigrants come in and we'll have a brand new workforce. And then that causes a housing crisis. The point being, and they don't dwell on this that much in the video, was that young Germans are becoming more angry and desperate. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's a really toxic concoction, especially in Germany, at the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, you get angry young people that are upset, don't have anything to work for, to live for. Well, there's your army. Remember this clip that we've played it before, and of course it was on the Trumpet back in 2017 when we interviewed Nicholas Frank, and he talked about Germany's fine when they're comfortable, but when they get uncomfortable, they'll show you their other face. This is clip 20.
Not always. As long as they are well fed and have their income and have their life, they are very satisfied with someone like Mrs. Merkel.
Right. But if you take away the stability, they'll search for...
Then we will show our other face, right. I'm sure of. If the stability is breaking down, it has, I would say, 5-6 years, then our society would really change. Right. In a way, I would say, but that's my personal opinion, it would go in the same direction which we had experienced during the Nazi time.
If you take away the stability, then we will show our other face. Mr. Armstrong said it's the economic crisis that will trigger it. Here's another clip from that PBS segment, clip 12.
Stark, a small startup, has won a $300 million contract for its loitering suicide drone that's been tested on the front lines in Ukraine. Senior Vice President Josef Kranavetvogel shows off the warhead that can take out a tank.
It's highly effective. It can destroy up to 800 millimeters of armored steel. It's battle-proven from beginning on, I would say, because we get quite a lot of feedback from soldiers that use our systems from the front line. It is essential that you scale up your production right now, and it can't be done within some minutes or seconds. So it needs some time to ramp up production and to set up production sites, and we are on it to do this right now.
They're getting ready, and you throw in an economic crisis, you throw in angry generation of young people, and you've got the Holy Roman Empire overnight. What would Churchill be saying? Just watching videos like that is stunning. When you think back to how he was raising the alarm at Germany, rebuilding its air force. And they're not hiding it now. They're bragging about it. The United States is encouraging them to do it. It should be the #1 story throughout the United States. Hey, they started World War I and World War II, and those weren't just well, they were world wars, but it wasn't like it was just this battlefield. I mean, they built concentration camps. Do we want to be a little more cautious about what we're doing? We just sleepwalk right into it. Yeah, the debt, we don't have to worry about the debt. We're too big to fail. Another clip. You can play these last ones together, clip 13 and 14.
Germany's race to build its stockpile of weapons and ammunition is predicated on the fear that in the not-too-distant future, an emboldened Russia may test NATO's strength by attacking one of the former Soviet Baltic states. In Marienburg, the young grenadiers swore to faithfully serve the Federal Republic and to bravely defend the rights and freedom of the German people.
It's important for me to stand up for my country, because this country gives you so many possibilities, so many freedoms.
Brave words on such a big day.
Swore to faithfully serve the Federal Republic. I don't know what the traditions are there with the German army, but they do not do well with the optics. It always looks like it's a Nazi parade. I mean, marching at night, there were times where they have had the torches because, well, there was some tradition. I mean, it's not hard to see. If you're an American, you would look at that and think, oh, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. It's probably okay to have 100,000 U.S. troops stationed over there if it means they don't have to rebuild their military. Like I said, it wasn't like it was just a war. They set up camps to exterminate people. And the United States doesn't care. They're encouraging it. And you only get a warning from the Trumpet magazine, from the Trumpet Daily, from the Key of David. It should be a lot louder. A lot more people should be paying attention. And Germany's conquest of the Balkans, Mr. Fleury says, God says, I will send him against an hypocritical nation And against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, to take the spoil and to take the prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets," quoting Isaiah 10, verse 6. He says, God says the Germans are a tool in his hands. They tread humans down like the mire of the streets. Germany's rise to power is God's doing, and we urgently need to understand why. Germany may have a master plan, but the living God has a master plan too. That's the question we have to ask. Well, why is this happening? Why is God allowing it? And when you see the signs, when you see the warning signs, you should think, where is this leading? What's the next step? Why is this being allowed to happen? What do I need to do? Mr. Fleury says, God will use the Germans in his master plan. They are to be sent against an hypocritical nation, people who work hard to appear righteous, but are very evil. This is talking specifically of America and Britain, and this is God's master plan for these nations. Now, ultimately, it will end with the return of Christ. There's great and tremendous hope in seeing all of these events play out. But God is issuing a warning. He's trying to tell people about what's happening and what's coming. This is talking specifically of America and Britain. You see, just by the events that are happening, where the United States and Britain are in prophecy. You see who Assyria is, or who Germany is in Bible prophecy, because of the events that are happening right now in 2026. One final quote from Mr. Fleury. This was from a February 2016 article titled "The Way of Charlemagne." He writes, "Thankfully, the same prophecies that told in advance of Germany's rise describe how the time of suffering just ahead will be exceedingly short, and then will have a stunning, spectacular conclusion. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand." It all leads to the return of Christ. That stone from heaven that just causes that Daniel 2 image to disintegrate, to become dust in the wind. Mr. Fleury says, Jesus Christ will soon return to put a stop to the Holy Roman Empire's reign of terror forever. Mankind will finally receive the blessings it has desperately lacked for the past 6,000 years. We must keep our minds on that glorious vision. Keep your minds on this vision. But act, take action. Respond to the warning signs. Ask what God is doing. We'll end a few minutes early, make up for some of the shows where I've taken you quite a few minutes over as well. If you want to, and I encourage you to, request all of the literature that we offer on this show, visit the website and go through Germany's conquest of the Balkans. You can read it right now. You can download it for free and print it for yourself, or get it on an ebook. Whatever way is easiest, it's available for you at thetrumpet.com. As always, thank you so much for joining us on the Trumpet Daily. Send your feedback to td@thetrumpet.com, and we will see you again tomorrow.